Hello and welcome to Fitzdares World of Sport in association with Boodles. Check them out at boodles.com. It's episode 7. I'm your host, Adrian Clarke, and alongside me today are two absolute winners. More about that later in the form of Lola, Katz Roberts and Henry Beesley. Fresh from a sterling debut a couple of weeks back, European football expert Tom Williams also makes a very welcome return. Here we are then, guys, episode 7. Welcome back, Tom. So good. The first time round.
Thanks for having me back.
Just 2 weeks later.
And so soon.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? You must be pumped for PSG in the Champions League final. Obviously, French football dear to your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And French football, much though I love it, it's not always the sexiest niche to have as a football journalist, in that sadly most people just do not find it very interesting at all.
I would have thought it is the sexiest. You know, all things French are a little bit sexy.
I mean, ordinarily, yeah. You know, like traditionally, that is what France is and the French are renowned for. So for me, it's been great for PSG to have been doing so well. Obviously, you know, knocked out a ton of English clubs to get to the final, and now they're one game away from winning the Champions League for the first time ever.
Fortuitously knocked out a couple of English clubs. We should. How have you been, Lola? Good week?
Honestly, Clarke, I'm on a bit of a come down from the weekend.
Okay.
I'm just battling with the trains and the elements on Sunday. So, you know, I'll be sitting quietly and not saying anything controversial this week.
Yeah, pretty exciting to see your team lift the Premier League trophy. Chelsea made it into the Champions League. I tipped against them. And I've got egg on my face.
Yeah, you didn't fancy us, Clarke, did you? On Sunday. Very professional, mature performance, though, from Chelsea. And yeah, hopefully it'll be us lifting the Premier League trophy, Lola, before not too long, hopefully.
I took my 9-year-old daughter to Leicester Races on Monday, Bank Holiday Monday. It was like a family fun day. 3 winners in the first 4 races. So,
get her on the pod.
Yeah, exactly.
Get her on.
Yeah, she absolutely nailed it. Right, let's get stuck into our main topic today, and that is the UEFA Champions League final. Paris Saint-Germain, who famously never been crowned champions of Europe, are the 23-20 favourites to win inside 90 minutes, a price that's shortening, by the way, and they take on the mighty Inter Milan, 2010 winners and finalists, of course, just 2 years ago. The Italians, conquerors of Barcelona, are priced up at 23-10 with Fitzdares. It is a modern big head against a traditional giant. In terms of age profiles, it's also rather fittingly young versus old, isn't it, Tom? So what do you think? Do those prices kind of align with you? Do you think PSG are worthy fabs?
I think so. I think you look at the teams that PSG have already beaten and the quality of their football as well. There is a real sense that this team is coming to the boil at exactly the right time. And I think if they can reproduce some of the performances that we've seen from them in the Champions League already, then they will probably win. Having said that, Inter are the worst kind of opposition for a young team like PSG. You know, a wizened old Italian team who've already played in the final quite recently, who have a very unique and quite awkward playing style, who have the motivation of wanting to atone for losing in the final in 2023 against Manchester City. And the Champions League is just full of examples of teams who got close, lost, and then came back the following season or 2 seasons later on and did it. And whereas this feels like the beginning potentially of a golden era for PSG, these Inter players and their coach Simone Inzaghi, they know that this is probably the last chance they're going to get to win this trophy. So in a way, there's even more on the line for them.
We talk about kind of emotional baggage. You know, PSG have never won it. They've been to the final relatively recent. It was 2020, wasn't it, against Bayern? And obviously Inter have just painfully missed out on the Scudetto. I mean, that was, I keep replaying in a kind of horrible nightmare Arnautovic's miss against Lazio that could have had them go 3-2. So in terms of kind of emotional baggage, both teams are coming into it with real motivation. Do you expect either team to kind of be weighed down, or do you see it going the opposite way and motivating them?
I think that's a bigger risk for PSG than for Inter. I think because Inter are so much more experienced, have older players who've been around the houses a bit. I think the emotional management of the game will be more straightforward for them. But
hang on a sec. This is the emotional management of the game against Barca wasn't wasn't textbook, was it?
Mm.
That was kind of a little bit crazy.
It was, but at the same time, Inter have had a really strange campaign in the Champions League, because you go back to the league phase and it was kind of the ultimate sort of Italian performance. They let in a single goal, lots of very close games. They're very solid at the back. They come up against Barcelona, this great clash of attack versus defence, and you think, how are Inter going to handle this? And they show that they can go toe-to-toe with arguably the best attacking team in the planet and come out on top. So I think that will give them a huge amount of belief. PSG, I think what we've seen in the latter rounds is that every now and again they do wobble. We saw that in the return leg of the quarterfinals against Aston Villa, where were it not for a couple of pretty miraculous saves from Gianluigi Donnarumma, they would have gone to extra time, they could have gone out. The return leg of the semi-final against Arsenal, they barely touched the ball in the first 20-25 minutes at the Parc des Princes. And
it was a battering, wasn't it?
I mean, I'm not sure I'd go quite that far, Adrian, but it shows that there is a vulnerability there. And, we have this idea of PSG as a club that routinely collapses in the Champions League. The players might change, but there's always that feeling in the background. And this is pretty much a brand new squad. Marquinhos is the only survivor of recent Champions League humiliations, but nevertheless, in the atmosphere around PSG, there's a knowledge of what has happened to them in Champions League campaigns past. So that's something they'll have to deal with. I suspect we'll know quite quickly from kickoff whether PSG are on their game or not, because you take the first game against Arsenal at the Emirates and they were brilliant. They go up 1-0 up inside 4 minutes and they play Arsenal off the park for the first 20-25 minutes. In the return leg, it was complete opposite scenario. So I think we'll get a sense very quickly of whether PSG are on their game.
The sort of criticism we've had of PSG talking about this as well amongst us over the past few weeks is just they have found ways, haven't they, to get themselves sort of knocked out of this competition. And it's true, like we've got loads of examples over the years, going back, sort of 10 years or so now. But it does just feel different this time, doesn't it? And I think I remember watching the game against Arsenal at the Emirates in the league phase, and they were comprehensively beaten. It was 2-0, wasn't it? And they never ever looked like they were going to score. So I wanted to ask you, like, what was the sort of turning point for them? What was the moment? Because how did they go from getting... They looked like children, I think Ted said, didn't he, last week in that game? And then a couple of months later, all of a sudden, we're talking about them as one of the favourites to sort of lift the trophy. What was like that moment where, that sort of all turned for them in this season's Champions League?
I think a lot of it comes down to Ousmane Dembele and his role. You go back to that game at the Emirates in October, and he was dropped by Luis Enrique on disciplinary grounds, wasn't involved. PSG are well beaten. And that was a time when there was a bit of dissent in the PSG ranks about the way that they were playing. Luis Enrique, as we know, is a sort of, a Cruyffian coach. He wants his teams to dominate. He wants them to dominate the ball. And he has in that PSG squad a lot of players who are exceptionally good on the counter-attack. Barcola, Doué, Dembele, the fullbacks, Nuno Mendes and Achraf Hakimi. And he was kind of asking them to play against their nature. We win the ball back, and we don't attack straight away. We recycle, we get in position, we protect ourselves against the risk of being counter-attacked ourselves. And it was during this period that some of PSG's players said to him, look, we feel like we're playing with the handbrake on. We want to play more of our natural game. And out of these conversations and out of Luis Enrique's decision to put Ousmane Dembele as the false nine, PSG found a different way of playing. Because if you look at the team that started that game at the Emirates, it's not very different to the one that will start in Munich on Saturday. So the personnel haven't really changed, but the tactics have changed a little bit. I think Luis Enrique has taken a step towards the players in a way that's been appreciated. And in particular, and in a way that I don't think anyone could have anticipated, Dembele playing in that role turned him into one of the most formidable goal scorers in Europe, even though he has gone off the board a little bit in recent
years. He has, yeah. Do you think that's going to impact his chance of winning the Ballon d'Or? Because his name has been thrown into the mix, hasn't it?
I think he's current favourite for the Ballon d'Or, and we know how these things work. Generally speaking, the Ballon d'Or goes to the standout player in the most successful team of the previous 12 months. We don't know how much the Club World Cup will count in that. If, Real Madrid win it, moonwalking through the competition, and Mbappe scores a hat-trick in every game, maybe he will win it. But if it's decided by the Champions League, which is historically what tends to happen, it usually goes to the most influential player. And I think even if Dembele has an absolute stinker on Saturday, he is the standout player for PSG.
Can I ask you what sort of game you think it's going to be? Because the last 6 finals have been low-scoring affairs, 1-0. The previous 8 finals, both teams scored in all of them. We had some really, really good games. If you think about the semi-finals, obviously Inter were involved in crazy games, and the quarter actually for them. PSG look vulnerable at times. They don't look like a team that's going to score a first goal and then shut up shop completely. Do you think that we're in for a slightly more entertaining game? Just a couple of the odds. Both teams to score is 8-11. Both teams to score no is even money. 14 of the last 19 finals have gone under 3.5 goals as well. Do you think it's going to be another low-scoring affair or not?
I suspect it probably will be. I mean, I can see both sides scoring. I can see.
Yeah.
I think what is really interesting about this match is the fact that both teams have very unique playing styles. They're both extremely well drilled, and I think both teams are able to kind of exchange positions because there is just this very high level of tactical knowledge that means that whether it's PSG and the fullbacks bombing forwards, or Dembele dropping deep and the midfielders getting forward, whether it's Inter and the way their wide centre-backs get forward, the role of the wing-backs, the sort of tactical level of tactical compensation, players slotting in to plug gaps is very high. I suspect Inter will want to press PSG, because I think that's generally their mindset when they start games.
Yeah.
And if they find that they're not succeeding with the press, then they drop back, and we know they're very comfortable defending deep as well. Okay. I think the first, we say this for every big game, every big fan, but the first sort of 10-15 minutes will be fascinating, and I think it will be, it will be what sets the tone for the rest of the game. And I think particularly when it comes to PSG, we will get a sense of whether it's going to be a performance comparable to the first leg of the semi-final against Arsenal when they were exceptional, or the second leg where for the first 25 minutes at least they...
Well, Inzaghi would have watched it. Inzaghi would have watched that, Lola, and said, well, they're vulnerable. If you get at them, if you have a bit of the ball here, and particularly if you put the ball into the mixer, for want of a better phrase, let the PSG, yeah, exactly, you can cause PSG problems, as Villa did, of course.
Yeah. I think we've seen plenty of examples when they've been up against the English clubs this season where they have been penned back in stages, and they have shown, when Henry says it feels different, they've come through Villa Park, Anfield, the Emirates. Those aren't easy places to go. So my kind of question for you would be, if they can do it here with the average age of the squad being so low, from a recruitment perspective, probably the only thing holding them back in the market has been lack of kind of... Real Madrid have got that pull of always feeling like they're going to win the Champions League. So if they do win it, is there anything stopping them from really going on to dominate Europe for the next 3-4 years?
Potentially not. The project, obviously, we don't like using the word project when it comes to football, but it's something that, that you hear more and more, but it seems extremely solid. Luis Enrique's just extended his contract. He has total buy-in from all the players. They are such a team these days in a way that they weren't for years when they were, that sort of gaggle of superstars hastily and somewhat ill-advisedly just thrown together and expected to figure things out for themselves. Now they're a proper team. They're the youngest squad in the Champions League. So in terms of age profile, they're not going to lose players because apart from Marquinhos, the skipper, even though I suspect he'll still be around next season. And I think above all, pretty much all of those players love playing for Luis Enrique and love playing this kind of football. So I interviewed João Neves, the PSG midfielder, a few weeks ago, and he talked about the work they do on the training ground, the sort of, the kind of the shadow play and the tactical work, the work they do on pressing, and his eyes lit up. And you get that sense watching PSG when things click. They must be a really enjoyable side to play, and it's not just that they're winning trophies, but they're doing it in this this really impressive, very stylish way, winning plaudits left, right and centre. And you can understand why the players who were already part of that would want to remain part of it. But you can also imagine how, particularly if they win the Champions League, that will appeal to other players who might want to, join the project.
So if they win this weekend, you would make them favourites maybe to go on and win it ahead of Liverpool, ahead of Arsenal, ahead of Real Madrid, ahead of Barcelona next year after?
I suppose so, in the sense that, if a team wins the Champions League, they go into the next season, you think, well, they just need to do what they did last season.
But are they better than Liverpool, in your mind? Because we all saw that game earlier on in the season where they absolutely schooled Liverpool. And really, it was the Alisson show, wasn't it? So, I mean, is that something that you think that they can repeat over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, every time a team wins the Champions League, they inevitably go into the next season as favourites because they've figured out how to win it. And every other team has to kind of pick up the pieces and figure out what didn't work out for them. And there are reasons why Liverpool didn't go any further than they did. We obviously know Real Madrid have got what looks like a bit of a rebuild on their hands. Are Arsenal ever going to sign a number 9? Are Manchester City ever going to win another game in Europe? Bayern, Vincent Kompany, how's he going to get on in his second season? So there will be question marks against all these teams, and there won't be the same question marks around PSG if they get over the line. And it has been such a burden for them, for this club, having these repeated humiliations in the Champions League. And I think, contrary to where Manchester City were in 2023, I think when Man City went in 2023, we thought, okay, well, they've kind of got the monkey off their back now, they'll go on and dominate. But actually, they were quite an old team by that point, and they fell away very quickly. Whereas you shouldn't have that with PSG.
Is the biggest obstacle to their continued success then the possibility that some of their best players might get poached? I know they're all tied down to quite long-term contracts, but are there any names that you can see being linked to the Premier League this summer?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I can't imagine that there will be many players in that PSG squad who will actively want to leave. So I think it's more looking at players on the periphery. Gonzalo Ramos being one example, Randall Kolo Muani being another. And last summer when PSG lost Kylian Mbappe, the expectation was they'll go out and they'll sign a new centre forward because you can't let Mbappe leave and not replace him. But they didn't, and it ended up being Ousmane Dembele, who came in as the sort of nominal number 9. So I think if any players are to be plucked from this squad, it will be the guys on the fringes like Ramos, like Kolo Muani, who are elite level centre forwards, just who haven't had a look in this season.
But so on the flip side, could PSG, if they win the Champions League, go and gazump an Arsenal, a Liverpool, Manchester City, Man United for one of these strikers? Or do you think that they're now wedded to Dembele up top? I'm thinking, somebody like an Isak or Gyökeres, Sesko.
Ordinarily, that's the kind of move you'd expect for a club like that without a starting conventional number 9. But a lot of the PSG success this season has been tied into what it was basically a Luis Enrique vanity project. People were screaming at him to sign a centre forward, and he decided he didn't need one. They were linked with Victor Osimhen quite a lot last summer. And he went into the season and he didn't actually know who was going to end up playing through the middle. And he tried almost every attacking player in the squad. Desiree Doué played as a false 9. Lee Kang-in played as a false 9. And it was only in the depths of winter when he settled on playing Dembele there that things clicked. And if PSG win the Champions League, he'll only be reinforced in those convictions. So I can't imagine PSG going out and sort of ripping up the approach that has served them so well by trying to sign more superstar players. If you've shown that you can win the biggest prizes in the sport without any superstars, you're not going to jeopardise that model by trying to sign superstars.
Yeah, just on Enrique, 83% win ratio in finals. Pretty good. Inzaghi's good as well, 73% as well. So these are two guys that aren't used to losing, that's for sure. In terms of the first goal scorer market, just wanted to sort of pick your brains, and we're going to chuck something out there. Dembele 13-8 favourite anytime scorer. Lautaro Martinez, of course, 2-1. Ramos 2-1. I'm guessing that's going to be off the bench. Barcola 11-5. Kvaratskhelia 9-4. Doué 12-5. Thuram, good value maybe at 13-5. But I've got a little fancy for Hakimi.
Yeah, one of the wing backs flying forward.
Well, it's interesting. The market seems to have cottoned onto this because Nuno Mendes has scored 4 goals in the Champions League. He's 10-1, but Hakimi is 6-1. I was like, well, why is this? But of course, in the semi-final, Nuno Mendes basically played as a centre back, and it was Hakimi that flew forward. If you're going to back one of the fullbacks to get involved, would you go with Hakimi?
You would, particularly because at the start of the season, going back to last season, the way that PSG built up with the ball was that Nuno Mendes filled in as a centre-back, and he's one of the best attacking fullbacks in the world.
Yeah.
And one of the discussions that took place between Luis Enrique and the squad this season was about giving Nuno Mendes more freedom to get forward, because that's his natural game. You know, you see it every time you watch PSG. Nevertheless, they still have that muscle memory of building up with a back three. Nuno Mendes tucks in, Hakimi gets forward, and an additional factor is the profile of the Inter wing backs. Obviously, Federico Di Marco gets forward a little bit on the left, but they're all about freeing up Denzel Dumfries. So if one of the PSG fullbacks is going to have the liberty to attack, it will be Hakimi, and we've seen throughout the Champions League how dangerous he can be.
Right, before we move on, who do we fancy? How do we see this one going, Henry?
I think we spoke about this last week as well. I feel bad for getting away from Inter because as regular listeners will know, I've been very very keen on them for a while. I think we are potentially underestimating them a little bit. You know, they're a bit better than perhaps we give them credit for going forward. They're not just that, you know, Italian team that nicks a goal and then sits in. So I think both teams will score. That's 8-11. But I think PSG are probably just going to have a bit too much for them over the 90 minutes. I think they're 23-20, aren't they, to win in 90. Could maybe see, PSG 2-1, something like that.
Lola?
Well, we've seen this be the kind of year of the underdog in football, and you know I like to be guided by superstition. So I am pulled towards Inter for that reason, but really, I think logic must prevail here. And for me, since having the unfortunate experience as a Liverpool fan of watching PSG absolutely dominate us at the Parc des Princes, I have felt they look like the best team in the competition, and the way that they've negotiated the challenges against those English clubs gives me confidence that they're going to do it. I think they do it.
I've got a cheeky little one for you. If you want to back PSG and just get a little bit more juice out of it, you could go PSG to win and go with PSG to win the most corners. And I'll tell you why. PSG will dominate the game, right? I mean, we expect them to probably dominate the game, be the one that's pushing, in which case you've got more chance of winning corners. They've had 101 compared to Inter's 42 during the competition. That ranks PSG second and Inter 20th. So it's 4-9 for PSG to win the most corners, but pair that with the result that you want, and that could be an interesting way in. Last word from you on the big game, Tom?
I've kind of felt all season long that it's PSG's season, that it's theirs for the taking. I still think they'll do it, but Inter are such a wily team, and I think in particular Inter pose problems that most teams don't pose, playing with a 3-5-2, playing with two centre forwards, the way their midfielders get into the box. PSG won't have faced that very much. I do think Inter will cause them problems. I wouldn't be surprised to see Inter score the first goal, but it kind of feels like PSG season, so I am going to go PSG narrowly.
PSG and both teams to score is a decent price. I think you're looking at over 3-1 for sure on that. If you'd like to place a bet on the Champions League final or any event discussed on this show, it's pretty easy. Just visit Fitzdares.com. Fitzdares also have a new app as well as a telephone and text betting service. If you give them a call, you can get prices on pretty much any market as well as special bets as well. 0207 851 5407. That's the number to call. Or you can text the office on 07492 882 213. If you quote the magic word, and the magic word is Boodles, you'll get an exclusive discretionary price boost as well. So make sure you do that if you get in touch with the office. Rest assured, the Fitzdares brokers will be generous. Max one price boost per person, must be used at odds of evens or greater. You'll have to be over 18, and please, as always, bet responsibly. Fitzdares World of Sport is proud to be sponsored by Boodles, the only fine jewellery brand who love sport just as much as you do. Boodles are great champions of British sport, so it's a natural fit for us to partner with them. If you're in London, make sure you check out their flagship store. It's at 178 Bond Street, but you can also look at their website too for some of the most beautiful, stylish jewellery around. That's www.boodles.com. Right, we had to talk about the football, of course, but what's going on elsewhere in the world? This is Fitzdares World of Sport after all. So, guys, has anything caught your eye in terms of the action we should be watching this week? Come on then, Henry.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously right in the thick of the French Open now, aren't we? And, I mean, the ladies' draw in particular looks really open. The men's draw looks a match probably between the top two seeds in Sinner and Alcaraz. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this kind of progresses as we move into the second week of the tournament. And yeah, Lola, do you have any strong views on either side of the draw?
You were Team Andreeva, weren't you?
You put Andreeva up last week.
I think that like the ladies, my fancy is actually outside the top 5 in the betting for the men's. I've had a bit of a change of heart. And I messaged Henry about this particular player, and I just said one word, which was wow. And that is João Fonseca, the Brazilian wonder kid. And
okay, how old is he?
He's 18. He's just about 2 weeks shy of turning 19. And yeah, I think it's Fonseca fever in Paris at the moment. He beat Herbert Hugh-Catch last night, but it was really the manner of the victory. He just blew him away. It was 6-2, 6-4, 6-2. I commented to Henry that what I really noticed was just the power of his ground strokes. It was really the power that Hugh-Catch couldn't live with. And at 18, to be able to do that, he knocked Rublev out, who was the 9th seed in Australia. And he really is getting a lot of attention. Apparently there was people kind of peering over the fence to watch him. He was on court 7 yesterday. So he's really captured the imagination. And it's been 24 years since the Brazilian legend Gustavo Kuerten, Guga, as he was called, won the last of his 3 Roland Garros titles. So I wonder if it's time. He's 33-1 at the moment. And he could be set to face Jack Draper in the 3rd round if both can get through there.
Well, that's interesting because Draper has drifted a little bit in the market. Your nemesis, Henry, 40-1. I thought he was a bit shorter than that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he's in the tougher side of the draw, isn't he? I think so. The bottom half looks the much sort of softer side of the two, and that's kind of where I wanted to come from here because. Do have quite a strong view on the men's winner here.
We like strong views. Come on.
I just think this is quite. I honestly think this is quite simple. Alcaraz will beat Sinner in the final. Since the start of 2024, Jannik Sinner is 86-3 against the rest of the ATP tour. So he's only lost 3 matches against people not called Carlos Alcaraz on the tour. But he's actually lost his last 4 meetings with Alcaraz. It's quite a small sample size, but. I think we can say at the moment Alcaraz has Sinner's number, particularly on the clay. And this is the main thing, right? It's such a different surface to the hard. Sinner's dominated on the acrylic in New York and in Melbourne. But Alcaraz just moves so much better than Sinner. And that's what you've got to do on the clay. So much more athletic. And yeah, he's able to just get around the court so much better. And it's so hard to get him off balance on these clay courts. Yeah.
So it's 21-20 favourite Carlos Alcaraz. Jannik Sinner's 2-1. Then it's Zverev 5s, Djokovic 6, Musetti 16-1. You might be thinking, why Musetti next? Well, he is in that bottom half of the draw, and he kind of looks the best bet outside of Carlos Alcaraz, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think in that top half though as well, you've got Zverev, you've got Djokovic. Who I know, Tom, last time you were in, we were talking about him and question marks over him, but you'd still rather avoid Djokovic, I think, in your half. Can we talk about Djokovic quickly? Just because he won in Geneva, and that was his first win on clay since, was it the Olympics? Henry? Yeah, but it's like...
Wasn't it like a conference league type event?
Exactly.
There's no glory.
There's nothing wrong with the conference league. It wasn't one of the big ones, which Alcaraz has won 2 of those.
A win's a win, and you'll be celebrating tonight if you win the conference league.
But for so long, Djokovic has been turning up at Roland Garros and thinking, this is Nadal's patch. I'm not the top man here anymore. Obviously, Nadal's no longer around. But the fact that he won Olympic gold at Roland Garros, he now has a part. He has his own history on that court, and he's clearly not at the level he was in previous years. It's perhaps hard to see him coming out on top. But I think that will count for something. You know, he won't feel like Roland Garros is quite as forbidding a place as perhaps he used to.
On the women's side, Sabalenka is the favourite, which kind of surprised me because Iga Swiatek has won 3 in a row. She's won it 4 times before. She's 11-4. So Sabalenka 13-5, Swiatek 11-4, Andreeva 4-1, Coco Gauff 9-2. Zheng 14, and Paolini, who won in Rome, of course, 16-1. So I don't know whether that's gonna offer some value. She was, of course, the runner-up last year.
Yeah, she got absolutely dispatched, didn't she, by Swiatek last year. And I think the main difference coming in this year is normally Swiatek's dominating the top of the market, and she's coming in here usually in really good form. As you say, she won 4 of the last 5. I think the fact that she has won 4 of the last 5 is the reason that she's 11-4, because if she hadn't necessarily, she'd be a much bigger price. She's coming in here. She hasn't won a clay court tournament this season. She played in Stuttgart as well as the main ones in Monte Carlo, Madrid and Rome. And she was really well beaten by Gauff at one of those tournaments, 6-1, 6-1, drubbing to her. So she played Raducanu later today, doesn't she? Which could be interesting. Sabalenka, I mean, she's probably the one, isn't she? Because she hits such a heavy ball. She's such a good ball striker that on clay she gets a bit more time. It's not as quick. Ball sort of sits up for her nicely. But yeah, I think if anyone's kind of going to dominate the WTA Tour, it's probably going to be her.
I'm off to the cricket. On Thursday at Edgbaston. Can't wait for it, actually. I really enjoy a day at the cricket. It's a day-nighter. England against the West Indies. Now, of course, this is the first ODI match England have played since a pretty shocking Champions Trophy where England lost all 3 matches. Brendan McCullum is now officially the gaffer, which you'd imagine would be a real positive, Tom. But, does Bazball translate into the 50-over format or not? I don't know.
I mean, it should do in the sense that it is a philosophy that came from the white ball format in the first place.
Cricket, just leather it from the start.
Yeah, completely. I mean, obviously it's not exactly the same team, but fantastic outing for the batsman in the one-off test against Zimbabwe at Trent Bridge. Harry Brooks' first outing as white ball captain, and there's always that question mark, isn't there, when the captaincy is given to one of the standout batsmen? Will he wear the proverbial armband lightly, or will it perturb him? But he seems such an unflappable batter, Brooke, that you can't imagine it's gonna trouble him unduly. There are all sorts of different kinds of anticipation in sport, but the anticipation at the start of an English cricketing summer is sort of right up there at the top.
Yeah,
I think this new kind of era that we're getting into feels very exciting.
I do think they've got a bit of a point to prove here as well, haven't they? They want to put on a show. You mentioned the Champions Trophy exit, and they came in with quite a lot of stick, didn't they? From the media.
They were terrible.
Arrogance was a word that was used. They didn't play well. Too much time on the golf course, not enough time in the nets. There were those kind of lines that were coming out following their exit. So yeah, I do think they've got a bit of a point to prove. Clarke, I'm very jealous that you're going, because you might see them put on a show in that first ODI. And just looking at the prices now, 1-4 England, West Indies 29-10.
I don't like that price. The ones for England lost 6 in a row, albeit 3 in India, and then of course the 3 in the Champions Trophy. So 1-4
back at home though, isn't it? I think it's the main thing.
Are you advocating for an emotional hedge?
Well,
a hedge, maybe a little cheeky hedge. I mean, I think there's big ramifications as well on this potential on this series, because the top 8 qualify automatically for the World Cup. Yeah, and England and West Indies are 8th and 9th at the moment, respectively, and there aren't that many ODIs between now and when that cut-off is. So to take sort of points off one another could be quite big, I feel. So look, West Indies did beat us over at their place the last 2 ODI series that we had. So it's going to be interesting. I'm a little bit worried about the bowlers, I've got to say. On that, it is a good bowlers track, usually Edgbaston. I was looking at the last 10 matches, an average of 220 runs scored per innings. So you can get no player to score a century at around even money, which I think could be quite tempting. The line as well for England is 285. That's the line that's been set if they bat first. I'm
You'd be an
inclined.
unders
I'm
man
inclined.
there.
I'm inclined.
Unders man
But
there, yeah.
when it comes to football, I like an undershout.
Yeah.
And in this particular game, maybe even though Bazball is sort of, dangerous, I could actually see maybe an unders coming in.
Early in the summer as well. What's the weather going to be doing?
Well, it's cloudy. I'm always looking at the weather. I'm going there, of course.
Yeah.
So most of this week, I will be looking at the weather app to see whether I'm going to be getting sunburn or maybe heading into town early. Which is always rather depressing. Who's into the darts? I mean, I'm sensing, Tom, that you're not a darts man.
I mean, it's just hard to find space in
you
your
not be a
sport
darts man?
viewing, routine when there's so much great sport on. But I just think that the Luke Littler phenomenon is such that it's harder and harder to avoid
You
the
can't
darts.
avoid it,
Even
yeah.
if you don't watch the darts, the darts just crashes into
Even
your
my mum is
social
watching the
media.
darts.
Well,
Yeah.
if Adrian's mum is watching the darts, then
I mean, she
what
likes
further
sport,
proof
but
do you
she's
need?
never
Yeah,
watched
they've made
darts
it.
in her life.
Yeah.
But
Even in France.
She texts
That's why-
me. She texts me. Have you seen the darts? Are you watching the darts? This is the Littler effect.
Yeah, I mean, even the French watch the darts. I think it's live on L'Equipe TV, and like for decades, the French have looked at darts as this particularly, slightly preposterously British thing that makes no sense beyond Britain's borders, and now they can't get enough of it.
Lola, arms crossed. I mean, your body language is screaming no interest here.
Well, no, I wouldn't say no interest. I'm thinking about the outfits, Clarke.
Okay,
What's your
yeah.
go-to outfit for the darts? Gunnosaurus.
I don't like fancy dress. I went to the Premier League. I went earlier only a few weeks ago. I went to the one in Birmingham, and I was very boring in terms of my dress. And dart shirts are really bad, aren't they?
What would your darts nickname be, Adrian? Do you ever think about that?
I have really no idea. I used to be called the Reverend, so maybe that. I mean, that's
The Reverend.
yeah.
Can you
yeah.
explain?
Usually slightly punchier dart nickname.
This is true.
You could play on that. Have some solemn, gospel music accompanying you to the hockey.
Ian Wright called me the Reverend.
Right.
Nice name drop
Back
there.
in the name. Yeah, I'm just going to throw that one out there. No, because back in the day as a youngster at Arsenal, of course, famously, they liked to go out for a few drinks, and it was the good time club, wasn't it, at the time? Tuesday club and all that. And I was a bit of a goody two shoes, I guess, and I didn't really drink much because I was trying to make it, I wasn't particularly, I wasn't a womanizer back then, and I didn't really swear much. And I remember in training, Ian Wright, he came up to me, he goes, "Clarke, you're so good, you're so nice." He goes, "You're like a reverend," and then it's just stuck. And no 19-year-old in the history of football or the world wants to be called the reverend, do they?
But it was a golden era of football nicknames, and if you showed any interest in anything outside the usual footballer circle of interest, then that would give you a nickname. Graham Lasso was nicknamed the Professor because someone once saw him reading a newspaper. The bar was not high.
It was not
the
high.
bar was not high.
I didn't see Wrighty for years and years and years, and then he bumped into me, and he goes, "Rev!" I was like, no, I've been shaking it off. So anyway, the darts is on. I mean, I guess you like it a little bit, right?
Yeah, Fitzdares as well is we do enjoy the darts as a company. We actually did an exhibition in December with Luke Littler, Peter Wright, James Wade and Dave Chisnell up in Manchester. So we all got to meet Luke after he won on the night. Obviously averaged something ridiculous like 115 across the night, and then I've been to the World Champs as well, and we all hope that we see Luke Littler play Luke Humphries in the final, right? That's what we're looking forward to. Littler look 5-6 at the moment, Humphries 21-10, but Littler's got the tougher of the semis, would you say, Clarke?
Gerwyn Price is 6-1, Aspinall 10-1. Gerwyn Price against Littler is the one he could trip up in because the head-to-head is actually 7-6 to Gerwyn Price, which Littler isn't behind in any other head-to-head. He kind of seems to get inside his head. Yeah. He's won the last two Littler against him, but in 2025 it's 4-2 to Gerwyn Price. So for that reason, I do like Luke Humphries 21-10. I think he's almost nailed on to beat Aspinall over the longer format. And then for me, it's a 50-50 final between him and Littler. Even though Littler is the man in form, it's 5 apiece. Yeah. If Littler and Humphries meet, the head-to-head in the last 10 is 5 apiece. So look, it's a great night. I would fully recommend getting involved in watching the final of the Premier League. Okay, let's play the 3 tenors now. Every week on this show, we discuss a trio of sporting events. And at the end of the pod, we all get a tenner each to place with Fitzdares. We'll keep a running league table of our performance throughout the season. And I'm delighted to say we had winners galore last week. And we got a new leader, Lola.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether to admit this on the show or not, but I had a bit of a hiccup with the pricing. And it turns out that my double was not the 3.25 to 1 that I thought it was. It was actually more like 8 to 1, Los Angeles and Field of Gold. So apparently I put it in the wrong calculator, and all I can say is, you know, I hope everyone got on it and got on it at the right price.
Well, you picked up over £77 worth of winnings, so well done to you. And you backed Sunderland as well in the playoff. Yeah. And I laughed at you for doing that.
Didn't I say that Sheffield United in the Wembley, the playoff curse? And you guys were like, no.
There's something about the ends. It's the East Stand. Okay. Any team that has that stand, they always win. You can go back. I wish I had the stat more on the top of my head than I do. But literally, like the last 10 Wembley matches, the team with their fans in the East Stand have won the game. So there you go.
Yeah.
Can I add, no one's going to believe this because I didn't say it, but when I was last on, I had a bet in mind for the FA Cup final, but I didn't share it. And this is going to sound like I'm being wise after the event, but my bet was Eberechi Eze first goal scorer, Crystal Palace to win. Obviously, it's all well and good saying that now. I have no way of proving that, but just for the record, I mean, even just for my own peace of mind,
we want to know what you're on then, Tom.
I needed to get that off. I'll get back to you with my Champions League final bet in a couple of weeks' time.
I'm impressed with that. So let's get to this week's bets. Have you got one in mind? If you were to pick one for any of the events we talked about today, Tom?
Yeah, I think this might have come up already, but both teams to score, PSG to win Champions League.
Good price on that. I think you get decent numbers on that.
Great minds think alike. Because that is literally what I mean. I did write
There's
it down
proof now
before
that it's not
we came here.
that we're all so sure.
So you're going to
I don't want to seem like I'm after timing either, but I did write mine down this morning. I don't know when you made your decision.
3.25 to 1.
Yeah, 3.25 to 1. And my logic here is we've talked about whether Inter's mean defence has kind of come unstuck a bit, and their semi-final tie against Barcelona equalled the record for the most goals scored in a Champions League tie. So I don't think they're going to keep a clean sheet against PSG, and I do think that given we've seen PSG pushed back against Liverpool, Arsenal and Aston Villa, I think Inter will also score.
Yeah. PSG have scored in 37 in the last 38 games. The one they didn't score in, they really should have done against Liverpool. You remember that one. And Inter have scored in 12 of the last 14. So I think it's a pretty sound shout. I think I know where you're going to go, Henry.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Alcaraz to win Roland Garros for a third consecutive year. He's 21 to 20 as things stand. Like I said, I was talking about the bottom half of the draw earlier. He's definitely in the right half there. It's hard to see anybody beating him over 5 sets, I think, on the way to the final. He's so difficult to beat at these Grand Slams, particularly on the clay. And I kind of just want to be against Sinner, really, as well, because he's only won one ATP tournament on clay in his career, and that was the ATP 250 at UMAG in 2022. So
look at you.
That's not Roland Garros winning form for me. So, yeah, I'm with Alcaraz.
Do you think you'll get shorter?
Well, yeah, my thinking was that he's 21 to 20 right now.
That seems skinny at the start of a tournament.
But then he's got a very good route through to the final. And if he then... I think he's basically only going to have to beat Sinner or potentially Djokovic. And he's going to be odds on for that final. So, yeah, he's gonna get shorter.
Right, my shout is in the Darts Premier League final. I'm going to go against the grain and back against Luke Littler here. Tough semi-final against Gerwyn Price. Might take a bet out of him. So I'm going to go with Luke Humphries at 21 to 10. Okay, that's all we got time for on Fitzdares World of Sport. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a nice review or tell a friend. It will help us reach even more people like you who'd enjoy this type of content. And remember to subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts. And please subscribe on YouTube as well. Lots of you are doing that. They're choosing to watch the show, which is absolutely brilliant. We don't want any of you to miss out on an episode. Also, if you'd like to find out more about Fitzdares or any of the offers you've heard here, please visit fitzdares.com. Remember, prices you've heard here are subject to change. It's 18 plus only, and please gamble responsibly. That's all we got time for, boys and girls. I'm looking forward to the weekend. Yeah, there's plenty going on.
Haven't even mentioned the Giro d'Italia, the first cycling Grand Tour of the year, which comes to a conclusion this weekend.
Who's going to win it?
I think it might be Simon Yates, Visma Lease bike. He's moved into contention, 26 seconds off the lead as we record. Isaac Del Toro, who had been leading, has been gradually pulled back by the pack. But and Richard Carapaz is also in contention. It should be interesting.
Yeah. Bonus tip there at the end.
Haven't quite sold it to me there, Tom. Sorry, I'm not going to be shooting into the
Huffing
cycling.
and puffing.
Yeah.
No, brilliant show. Thanks for listening again. That was Fitzdares World of Sport. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm Adrian Clarke. Your producer was Simon Watts, here in the studio today with a brilliant Tom Williams, Lola, Katz, Roberts, and Henry Beesley. Fitzdares World of Sport is a track record production, and we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. See you then.